Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the first part of our free webinar series, Assessing Your Company Culture. My name is Aimee Turla. I will be the co-facilitator for today's free webinar. Just a quick check before I turn you over to our speaker for today. Can you type one if it's your first time to join our free webinar? Yeah. Yeah. All right, thank you. Mukhang medyo, ayan, I think there are a lot, no? So, and I see familiar names, no? So thank you again for always joining our programs, um, especially the paid ones. And of course, we appreciate those who give us their support, continuous support on our free webinars. Yes. Okay. So for the benefit of those joining for the first time, our free webinar, I'd like to share this short video introduction of our speaker and host for today's webinar. Okay. Let me just prepare that. All right. Thank you. And without further ado, I now turn you over to our Managing Director and the founder of Talent Reach, Mr. Ronnie Turla, Certified Human Resource Professional.
Good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to this free webinar on assessing your company culture. I'm Ronnie Turla again, your facilitator, and I'm happy to see all of you here in this room. So thank you for spending your time with us. So for the next 60 minutes or so, we will be together and we will talk about a very interesting topic, which is very uncommon for especially for those who are in human resource field, no. But it is one of the things that we are tasked to do, no. So culture is a topic that is very broad, no. So it's almost the same with the topic on leadership. Okay, so today we're going to offer the first time that we're offering a two-part series, no. So parang Netflix lang ito, no. So for today, so we're going to discuss part one for today, and of course part two will be sent to you for the for the schedules of the part two of this webinar. Okay, because the topic is very expansive. No, it's very broad. No, that's why we decided to break down this particular webinar. No, so today again it's July 22. No, so Friday, and it's a Friday afternoon for everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. So I hope that this will be a an informative session for you. No, and I hope that you will be able to bring some information, some nuggets of wisdom, no, when it comes to the aspect of culture. Ayan. So we'd like to again welcome everyone in the room. Ayan. So thank you for attending this particular program, and I hope no that this is something that will pique your curiosity with regards to company culture. No? Ayan. Okay, so I guess no, most of us, some of us, no, are probably first time attendees but I also see a lot of um, regular attendees of our Talent Reach webinar, which we have consistently done for the past 2 years already since 2020. So we have offered free webinars month after month, discussing topics, no, and being in the field of human resource management. And of course, we are a training and consulting company. That's why we do this as part of our outreach, no, for companies, for individuals, and as well as professionals and business owners. Okay, so without further ado, no, I will now jump in to our program proper. No? So just to do a standard audio check, no, can I check whether my audio is loud and clear for everyone, so that more or less you can enjoy and consume, no, this particular program for today. So thank you for giving me that thumbs up sign. So let me now upload my screen as we discuss the topic on um, assessing your company culture. Okay, so here we go. So as we've said, to start off our topic for this afternoon, okay, so give me about 45 to 50 minutes to discuss this particular topic, okay, and in this part, no, we're going to discover um, the four types of company culture. No? So, of course, we're going to look at some theoretical backgrounds of culture, because that's how we would be able to really understand our own culture. No? So, our own companies, which you belong to, possesses different types of culture. Okay, and as we will discover for today, there is no one type of culture that is most suitable in any organization. No? But today, what I'm going to share with you is a systematic way for you to be able to identify what kind of culture, no, is present in your organization, and if you are to do some kind of organizational change, no, or influence people towards a certain type of culture, then this assessment that we are going to tell you will help you, no, in your journey towards organizational change. Okay, so this is something that will be helpful for those who are probably in their human resource field, anyone who's probably doing business partnering, as well as doing strategic HR. So this is something that will be useful for those people here who are involved in those particular kind of activities. No? So again, this free webinar on assessing your company culture, uh, here are the things that we're going to discuss. So part one, which is today, we're going to discuss what organizational culture is all about. No? And we're going to also look at the three levels of organizational culture according to Edgar Schein. No? So this is something that we should be able to understand. And of course, the introduction to our competing values framework, which is the framework of the assessment that I'm going to tell you. No? So from there, we should be able to see what are the four types of culture that we will derive, no, out of that assessment. And at the tail end of my session for this afternoon, I'm also going to show you and illustrate partially how the organizational culture will be used. Okay, so that will end part one. No? Now, part two, we're going to be more practical and see some case studies. So that's why you don't want to miss the second part of this free webinar, because we're going to share some case studies on how successful organizational culture using this assessment, no? And how you can implement culture change, no? From assessment to culture change. So that's what we're going to explore in the second part. No? And we're also going to look at how culture dialogues and how to have a culture workshop in your company. No? Because if you're wanting to improve your culture, no? So it's important that conversations and communication is initiated, no? And as we can see, culture is something that is sometimes unconsciously being implemented or being practiced in the organization. So that will be part two, and of course, what are the next steps in terms of assessing your company culture? Okay, so that will be the two-part series that we're going to talk about. So just to give you more or less the overview of this free webinar. Okay. Okay, so first off, let's try to see. Maybe you're all familiar with this particular iceberg, no? So for most people in the field of HR or even psychology, no, the iceberg illustration, no, is very synonymous to culture. So when you look at the iceberg, we have, of course, your observed behaviors, your customs, your symbols, your written rules, no, and of course, policies and all are part of what is what we call the observable. No? But deep within our culture, we do have our values, no? Our attitudes, group norms, and unwritten rules. No? So beneath the iceberg itself, as you can see, are things, no, expectations that we have, and that is where we should be able to also draw in our company culture, no? Because when you look at organizational change or culture change, I've always believed that it starts with your unwritten beliefs, no? So the belief system of any company, the mindsets of the leaders as well as the staff, no, reflects what the culture is all about, no? So this particular belief system influences the company culture, no? So just to quote Edward Hall, he said, "Culture hides more than it reveals, no? And it hides most effectively from its own participants." No? Very interesting quote, no, from a very famous expert as well, no, Edward Hall. No? So this is very telling of what culture is all about. No? Now, culture, as we can see, is a pattern of shared tacit assumptions that was learned by a group as it solved its problems of external adaptation and internal integration. No? That has, again, worked well to be considered valid and therefore to be taught to new members as the correct way to perceive, to think, and feel in relation to those problems. No? So if you look at this particular definition, you can see that we do have assumptions that we have whenever we solve problems, no? And even how decisions are made and how fast or how slow things get in the organization defines culture, right? And culture is something that is passed on to people, and one way that is done is through what we call socialization. When I say socialization, that includes your orientation and onboarding. So whatever you relay to your employees, for example, new employees, both the written and the unwritten becomes part of the culture. Okay, so culture again is simply the way we do things around here. No? So that's basically how companies define their company culture, right? So culture, there's no right and wrong culture, I would say. Okay, so for every organization, they have their own set of culture. For some reasons, it was developed over time, as we have said, and certain assumptions were made out of that, and that's why we said, no? When you look at culture, you can say that relatively this is the culture of an organization, but at the end of the day, we cannot be able to say that that is the wrong culture. No? Now, as we've said, what culture comprises the collective assumptions, no, of the way we do things around here. Okay, so that particular statement, no, captures what culture is. Now it's very important. No, let me highlight this particular aspect. No, so in organizations, you will see that people copy, coach, and correct, okay, each other to fit in this collective culture and be part of the group. Okay, so the term copying, for example, happens in organizations. No, one employee looks at another employee, looks at his leader, his boss, for example, and copies whatever the other person is doing. No, also people can coach. okay, what should be the proper culture, okay? And at the same time, the aspect of correcting, no? That's why the policy, for example, on employee discipline is something that is important, no? Whenever you discuss, the rules and regulations of the company, no? Because it's important, no? If you'd want to have, a very good culture in the company, it starts with what are the basic rules and regulations, no? Because remember, no, in HR we talk about employee relationship, no? And for any relationship to flourish, no, there has to be an acknowledgement of certain rules, no, that has to be observed in the organization. Okay, so the copy, coach, and correct happens instantaneously, no, wherein that particular assumptions and practices becomes now what we call culture. Okay, so why is it important to work with culture? No, because the way we do things around here determines a lot of things. No, first of all, it determines our behavior, and thus it influences our performance and the turnover of people, which is again important for HR as one of the key metrics in terms of employee retention. Okay, of course, customer satisfaction and reputation affects or culture affects customer satisfaction, right? Market share and competitiveness also is one of the reasons why we have to work with culture. So ultimately, when you look at it, no, everything that we do, no, boils down to our culture. Okay, so um, making our culture work means that we avoid 50 to 75% failing change projects because they don't match with the culture. Okay, a lot of times, if you're in HR and you start trying to change the culture, most of the time you will experience some failure. No? And because of that, we go back to the starting point of really trying to make sure that we understand where the company is. No? So for any organizational change to happen, and I've mentioned this several times in my talks before, even in my classes, no, that the most effective organizational change are not internal, no. Most organizational change are started from external. Okay, what does that mean? No? That means that if you look at organizations who have changed dramatically, no, it was not because of an internal drive that made the change in the organization. It's really more of the external aspect. No, that's why when you talk about the SWOT analysis, right? When you do the SWOT analysis, no, as part of planning, no, the part of the opportunities and threats are important. No, so most of the time we tend to celebrate our strengths and weaknesses, no? But the opportunities and threats that we have in our organization will help us, no, identify how we can change, right? So because external factors do affect the culture of the company. So again, organizational culture. Uh, let's look at the framework provided by Edgar Schein. Um, Here's the three levels of culture, as we can see. So when we talk about the three levels of culture, we have the visible structures and processes. These are the easy to see, no? Of course, the espoused values, okay, and of course the basic assumptions. So let's look uh, more specifically on these three levels of culture. Okay, so first of all, when you talk about the surface manifestation and artifacts, this is shown through the following um, most visible and accessible forms, no, such as your dress codes, okay, formality in relationships, okay, working hours, okay, meeting etiquettes, no, a way that the company makes decision, the communication, no, between employees, between superiors, etc. No, social events, the use of jargons and symbols, okay, the way conflicts are handled in the company, and of course the aspect of work-life balance. So these are what we call manifestations, no? Meaning when you look at an organization, the following things mentioned here are your surface, no, yung easily seen in the company. No? Now, of course, we do have our organizational values and beliefs. Here are some examples, no, as we can see. Okay, so these are examples of values that companies do have or do practice. Okay, from different types of organization. Okay, so in this case, the values and beliefs are things that we hold mostly, no, to our to the core of the organization. Okay, so organizational values and beliefs are said to provide a common direction and act as guidelines for behavior. Okay, that's why it's important. No, I remember if you are a regular attendee of our free webinars, um, in a previous month, we have discussed about organizational value, how to make it stick. No? So that's something that we have offered in previous months. No? So now, values often originate from the founders of the organization. That's why if you talk about value system, there's no better way to identify values than observe and converse with your founders. No, because that is how you actually generate your organizational values. No, typically values and beliefs are based on moral, societal, or some religious precepts learned in childhood and modified through experience. No? I remember I used to be part, no, in my early employment. I was part of a company, no, that was run by owners which have certain religious belief. No, that's why one of the things that we don't entertain, no, in organization during that time are employees who get become entangled in a relationship that is illicit, for example. So that is an example of organizational value, no? So that we don't tolerate such. No? So remember, values are what you tolerate. Okay. So also, values are espoused or alluded to, no. But the question is, are they really adopted? No. So I think that's a challenge for most of us, especially if you're in HR. You would be asking that question: is this something that we really practice? Okay? So the basic assumptions would be the invisible, pre-conscious, and taken for granted understanding held by individuals with respect to their human behavior, no? And the organization's relationship to its environment. No? So ultimately, the strength of an organization's culture depends on the homogeneity of the group members. No? So it's very important that socialization plays a key role into this. What do I mean by socialization? No? So when you look at culture, it's very easy to see how employees become, ingrained in the company, and what are the groups that you have in the company. Okay, who interacts very well with each other. Okay, so in this case, the basic assumptions would normally be what you will assume, no, in a particular organization. Okay, now the three levels of culture, as you can see, no, presents to us the actual culture, no, and the desired culture. So this is very important to take note. No? So when you're trying to look at your company culture, okay, normally you'll have to be able to see what is the actual culture and what is the desired or preferred culture. No? And the difference between those two is what they call the culture gap. Okay? And this is what you have to uncover. Okay? And that's the reason why you do what you call an assessment. No? Because you'd like to see, no, what is the difference between the actual culture versus the desired culture. Okay? So let me now introduce, no, the assessment, no, the what we call the organizational culture assessment tool. Okay, so it's called Organizational Culture Assessment Instrument. This were developed by Professors Cameron and Quinn, and this is based on what we call the Competing Values Framework. No, and this tool has been researched and validated and has been used by over 10,000 organizations worldwide. No? And in part two, as I've said before, we will showcase a few number of cases of how this particular assessment tool was used for organizational change. Okay, so there's quite a lot of materials pertaining to this. For example, that's why it's important for us to realize that we do have to research on certain aspects of this tool. Okay, I'm giving you the introduction for this particular assessment, but definitely it's important for us to also do some research. Okay, so the tool itself, or the OKAI, offers quick identifiable diagnosis with a visual profile. Okay, it's also quantitative because it uses a certain assignment of number, but also it's completed with qualitative information. Okay, so also, the tool has a consensus about the current and the preferred culture, which I will explain later. Okay. Also, OKAI, or the tool itself, provides us the momentum for change. No. So let's say, for example, if there was some major changes in the organization, no, that would be a good time for us to introduce the organizational culture assessment. Okay. So this now becomes the basis, no, for successful and sustainable change. No? And if you will look at the cases, no, this particular tool has been used not just on prior the change, but even while the change was happening. No? Because when you talk about managing change, especially culture change, no, you'll have to be able to sustain the change effort, okay, from the time that you assessed it before the culture change, and then while the change is happening, and after changes have happened. Okay, that's why this particular tool can be used as a pre and post, no, assessment tool. Now, here's a comment from uh, one person who has used it. No, so um, and if you look at this one, no, it's really a useful tool. I myself have used it for some projects in my previous engagement, no, and I've seen that most people tend to agree, no, with the results that they get out of the assessment tool. Okay, now what is the basic foundation of um, the OKAI tool? No? So the organizational culture assessment is based on what they call the competing values framework. Okay, so in this framework, there are two major polarities of values, no, found to really determine organizational effectiveness. Okay, so what are the two polarities? Number one, internal versus external focus, and second is stability versus flexibility. Okay? So, when that is combined together, no, it now provides you the four culture types. Okay? So, the culture types again, as mentioned here, are the clan culture, adhocracy culture, okay, hierarchy culture, and market culture. So these are the four cultures that are derived from the assessment. Okay, so let's go deeper in terms of the four culture type. No? So if you look at the four culture type, as we've mentioned, we do have what we call the clan, adhocracy, hierarchy, and market. Okay? Now, each culture type, no, is present um, in any organization, okay? But if you look at it directly, no, some organizations tend to have more of a certain culture, no, that was developed, no, than the other. Example, no, most organizations that I've seen who have taken this assessment tool tends to be on the collaborative, no, the clan culture. Most Filipino companies tend to be very clan, okay, meaning that we do things together, no, and there's that family spirit, okay. But then again, if you look at the entire culture type, huh, you'll have to see the presence of the four culture has to be managed in such a way that it aligns with what are the directions of the company. Okay? So for example, if we're trying to put in some changes in organization, let's say for example, if HR is trying to, put in their standard policies, procedures, and guidelines, no? That is part of what they call the control or the hierarchy. Okay, why is that? No, because we'd want to do things right. Okay, that means that we'd want to predict the type of culture that we have. No, and we have to remember that if we have the control culture, no, it has to be incremental. Okay, if we are to introduce control and hierarchy in the company, we have to make sure that it is progressive. It is not something that you do one time and it's done. Okay, so it is something incremental. Now, also, if the company, no, is faced with a very difficult problem, no, somehow, no, the create or ad hocracy culture, no, can be tapped, no, to be able, no, to break through. Okay, so companies who are able, no, to innovate and create new processes, new businesses, for example, then the create culture becomes now the dominant culture in the company. Okay, and finally, also, if you look at the compete or the market culture, that means that, whatever you're trying to do, no, you have to do things fast, okay? Because you have to compete. Meaning that when you talk about the market culture, no, you can see that the company now engages with metrics, numbers, data, for example. And that is what we mean by the compete culture. Okay, we do things fast, no, because we'd like to have short-term performance. No, we have to be competitive. So again, all of these things are present in organization. Okay, so now let's go deeper when you look at the four culture types. Okay, so the competing values framework tells us that for every culture type that you have, okay, starting with the clan culture, the orientation for the clan culture is to collaborate. Okay? Now, the leader type in this kind of culture, there are certain words, no, that will describe, particularly facilitator, mentor, and team builder. So that is the type of leadership, no, that is needed to spouse the clan culture. No? What are the values drivers of this type of culture? You have commitment, communication, and development. Now, the theory of effectiveness for the clan culture is that human development and high commitment will produce effectiveness. Okay? So, that is, again, the culture type of clan. Okay? Now, the second type of culture is adhocracy. Okay? So, the orientation for adhocracy is to create. No? So the leader type that we're looking for in an adhocracy culture is an innovator, an entrepreneur, or a visionary. Okay? So that's why when you look at the organization, no, that kind of leader, no, fits well in an adhocracy culture. What are the value drivers? No? Innovate outputs, become agility and transformation. Okay? And the theory of effectiveness for adhocracy would be innovativeness, vision, and constant change will produce effectiveness. So that's the second type of culture that we have. The third type of culture is hierarchy. Okay? So for the culture of hierarchy, the orientation is control. Okay? The leader type that we need here would be a coordinator, a monitor, and an organizer. Okay? What are the values drivers? No? You have efficiency, timeliness, and consistency, and uniformity. Those are the value drivers. No? The theory behind the culture of hierarchy is that control and efficiency with capable processes will produce effectiveness. Okay? So when you talk about process, when you talk about policies and procedures, that's what they call a culture of hierarchy. Okay? Putting control. And finally, the fourth culture is markets. So the orientation for market culture is compete. Okay? What is the leader type for the market culture? You have hard driver, competitor, and producer. Okay? What are the values? Market share, goal achievement, and profitability. Okay? The theory of effectiveness of the market culture is aggressively competing and customer focus will produce effectiveness. Okay? So those are again the four culture types. So remember, these four culture types does not necessarily just pertain to companies for profit. No? So even companies which are non-profit, no, can also use this type of framework. Okay? So remember, when you talk about the four culture types here, okay, you have the four things, no? Collaborate, control, create, and compete. Okay? So let me just check, no? Let me check the participants. Are we uh, are we understanding, no, the four culture types? So let me just check whether if you were listening to the discussion so far, no, can you tell me one type of culture? Okay, or probably, no, if I ask you right now, let me ask you a very direct question for those who are here in the room. If I ask you right now to describe your culture out of the four culture types that I have discussed, no, how would you describe your culture? Kindly type your answers in the chat box, please. Mhm. Okay. So the question here is, depending on the culture type that you have, no, that means, no, you have to align that with what is the direction of the organization. Okay, if you'd like to have a culture change, no, then there has to be a sort of movement towards it. Because remember, as I've said, no, that four types of culture, no, one can be dominant, but that doesn't mean the other culture type is not present. It is present. But the question is, are you going to use that, no, for culture change? Okay? Remember, di ba? Change in culture does not happen in big leaps. It happens in small pockets. Okay? So it's very important for us to recognize that. Now, of course, I've asked you whether what type of culture you would have, no? But you can only, no, again, verify that if you look at your tool. Okay? So of course, no, we do have our assumptions. No? So basically from the presentation that I've shown you, you might have, a certain assumption. Well, I think my culture seems to be control, create, compete, etc. No? But what's important here is to test our assumptions, no, using an objective tool, okay, which I will show in a little while. Okay, so again, it's very important for us to understand the framework of the tool itself. So in the tool, the 6 dimensions of culture are then measured. Okay? So in the tool itself, there are 6 dimensions that are measured as part of the survey questionnaire. What are the 6 dimensions? You have the dominant characteristics. Okay? Second is the organizational leadership. Third is the management of employees. Okay? Fourth is the organizational glue. Okay? Fifth is the strategic emphasis, and sixth is the criteria of success. Okay, so these are the key dimensions of culture that you'd want to be able to understand that is present in the organization. Okay, so this will help you understand where you are right now using this particular tool. Okay, so let me now show you, just to be specific, no, what type of survey are you going to use, no? And by the way, this particular sample form, no, will be sent to your email, no, as part of your participation in part 2 of this webinar. So let me show you this particular tool, no? So again, this is called the organizational culture assessment. Okay, so this is the sample of the tool. Okay, so I hope you can see it. Okay, can you see the tool? Can you see the actual form? Yeah, so this is the sample form we're in. No, the 6 key dimensions are indicated. No, so as you will see, this particular tool gives us 6 key dimensions, and there are 4 description for each key dimension. And what we have to do is to be able to assign, no, points for every item here, particularly for the now and the preferred. Okay, so this is your dominant characteristics. You have the total. Okay, second is organizational leadership. Okay, third is the management of employees. Fourth is organizational glue. No, so if you notice, no, in the assessment itself, no, there is the difference between the now and the preferred. Okay, so when you implement this type of tool, no, and ask people to write their perception of the current, which is the now, no, and also ask what is the preferred culture. Okay, so that is how this tool is being used. Okay, and of course the whole aspect of scoring, no, So this is the manual way of scoring it. Okay. So there is an instruction for this one. Okay. And from here, you now have the profile of the culture. Okay. So the profile of the culture will tell you, no, if your assumptions of your perceived culture is correct. Okay. So, and the good thing with this type of assessment is that it can be um, presented in a visual format. Okay. So you can create a visual format, no, to let your company know what type of culture is present in the organization. Okay. So again, this sample will be shared to you and will be sent to your email, as part of participating in this webinar. Okay, so that you can be able to use it, no, for our next webinar, wherein we'll be discussing actual cases of how this particular tool was used for organizational change. Okay, does that sound interesting so far? Okay, I hope so. And I hope I'm explaining it clearly to you, no, so that you can be able to make use, no, of this particular tool that I'm sharing with you. No? So again, the assessment that you have to do is you can divide, no, 100 points over the 4 descriptions that corresponds to the 4 culture type. Okay? And by dividing the points, um, you'll have to again more or less parang divide, no, how you perceive, no. And again, there's no right and wrong answer here, because what we're going to do is to survey, no, a majority of your employees and to assess each of the 6 dimensions for the current situation. Okay? And when you look at your profile, which you were able to generate, no, then you would now see what is the dominant culture type. Okay? So depending on the answers of participants and respondents, then you can be able to say this is the dominant culture type according to the perception of our employees. Now, obviously, you will have to compare the culture type of the now and the preferred if there's a gap, okay? Or is there congruency, meaning there's no much difference in terms of the now and the preferred culture, okay? And what does that mean to us? Okay, that means what is the impact of the culture profile that we have discovered. So this is an example of how the culture assessment is created with a profile. The graphic profile is presented to you. No? So when you put the scores together of different employees, no, then you should be able to identify the different culture types. No? So you can see here, no, the blue line represents your preferred, and the now represents your now culture. Okay, so that is how this will be represented. No? Now, in the profile that I've shown you so far, you can see that the dominant culture is clan, no, followed by adhocracy culture, no, the focus on flexibility and professional freedom. Okay, so hardly there's no difference between the current versus the preferred. So that means that somehow, based on your culture, you might say that the culture itself that is present in the company is something that they're comfortable with. No? But here's the question. What if you discovered in the profile, no, that there is, that initiative to change, no, the clan culture to a market culture, but apparently employees tend to be more of the clan. You get what I mean? So that means, no, this assessment will give you a snapshot of what is your current and what would be the preferred culture. And in between that, that's where you have to be able to come up with what are we going to do to move our culture and be able to create another type of culture. No? So if you're comfortable with the clan culture, for example, there's nothing wrong with that. No? Actually, it's very characteristics of some organizations. Okay, but it doesn't mean that it stops you from changing the culture. Okay, so there is congruence. So when you see the graph itself being, the red and the blue lines are aligned with each other, that means that in in the different key dimensions, you are aligned. Okay? Now, the good thing here is you can compare your own culture type with other cultures based on, those companies who have already used it. Okay? So in this case, you now identify what is the development phase of the organization. If we started, no, the company as a pioneer, no, and then we grow as a clan, no, then you structure in hierarchy and assure results in a market culture. Okay? So that means that the four culture type can be your way of developing what would be the direction of the company. Again, it's important to know where you started. So what matters here is you know exactly where you're starting. Okay? So as part of not just the assessment, it's important for us to conduct after the assessment a workshop. So the workshop, no, the current and the preferred cultural profile will now be the starting point for solid change. No, um, from those qualitative information that you will get, no, you will engage employees and then tell them what are the observed behaviors in the organization telling us, no, particularly clan, market, hierarchy, etc. No? So in that case, no, the behaviors become now very concrete. Okay? So in this workshop, what you're going to do is to manifest what are the positive and negative behaviors pertaining to the culture type. Okay? So the workshop itself challenges employees and leaders to really identify what type of behaviors should we change. Okay? So both the positive and the negative. So that's where the workshop happens. Okay? So that's why if you can see here, not just the assessment, no, the assessment is the starting point, but after that, you'll have to do some workshop. Okay? So when you do the workshop, no, this particular tool itself will help you make change and do some restructuring or even downsizing and become successful. Okay? It also can be used to assess a possible merger. Okay, how? If you look at the culture of another organization versus your own, no, you can also assess whether can I merge these two type of companies. So the assessment will help you, no, in terms of the possible merger. No? Also, it will help you improve leadership and employee retention. Okay. Another use of the OKAI tool is to check employee satisfaction. Okay, because that is part of the assessment tool to be able to diagnose whether is there dissatisfaction. Okay, also it is used to enhance organizational performance because if you identify your culture type where you're not good at, no, then you should be able to focus more on your initiatives. No, and also the OKAI can be used to help to hire the right people to fit into the culture. Okay, does that make sense? So that means that you now have an understanding of why culture change is difficult because there are competing values in the organization. Some people tend to have, a clan mindset. Some people have an adhocracy or innovation. Some have a hierarchy, and while the rest have a market culture. So that means that there is a really competing values. But at the end of the day, once you know what you have in your organization, that is the starting point for you to change the culture. So when you use the OKAI plus the workshop itself, no, the assessment plus the workshop, you turn the resistance into cooperation. And I've seen this happen in my own eyes. No? So when I presented the results of the OKAI tool, for example, people started to realize, oo nga, no? I mean, in Tagalog, no? They realize that they have such behaviors, no? And because of that, no, the manager becomes now, is able to directly point, no, what are the things, no, that are not very healthy, and as well, it will help the leader to become transparent, no, because in the workshop, no, it's important for them to be direct to the point, no, and what's important there is that they are somehow prepared, no, to work on certain parts of the culture that is not helping. No. Second, clarity on where you stand now and where you want to go. Okay. In a workshop that I have done, after the workshops that have been conducted, that became now the jumping point for the company to go in strategic planning. Okay, so this particular tool, the assessment tool plus the workshop, is a good um, pre-workshop prior to your strategic planning. Okay, so for some of you, for example, who are thinking right now, we are about to go into strategic planning for the end of the year. No, so this is a good starting point. No, so instead of just using the SWOT analysis, I highly encourage you. You can use this particular tool. No, so third, use information and energy from all levels in the organization, because this type of tool can be accessible to any type of employee. Okay, so this is a survey that you will use, no? And people can actually take the survey. Okay, and from there you now have realistic plans, um, and from there you should be able to discover some hidden conflicts, okay, between departments. I've seen this also happen in a workshop wherein one department who was not very favorable with another department had to tell them what are the things that you're going to stop doing and what are the things that you will continue doing. Okay, and from there, no, after the workshop, they had a separate meeting to discuss their differences. Okay, so that means that this particular tool can help you become more successful and provide some sustainable change in the organization. Okay, so again, it's not a magic pill, but it is something based on research. No, this has been validated and has been used in different organizations. Okay, so again, when you utilize the OKAI or the organizational culture, you can see how the team can engage in sustainable change. Okay, and if you use the OKAI format to realize your tailor-made successful change, and I wish you good luck for this one, no, if you are going to use the OKAI format. Okay, so that sums up part one of assessing your company culture. Okay, so as I've said, the second part of the culture is something that you will look forward to when you talk about the case study. Okay? So the case study has used the tool, no, and I will share with you what are the learning points of that particular organization in terms of how it was used in direct application. Okay? So that will be exciting to find out in our part two of our webinar. And of course, from that aspect, we will tell you how the tool can be used to do some organizational change. Okay? So I hope that by sharing this particular information and knowledge to you, you will be able to assess your company culture. No? So at this point, I'd like to, with the remaining time that we have, no, I'd like to encourage participants, no, to actually ask questions, um, and be able to interact with me with regards to the information that I've shared. No? So I always encourage participants to ask questions, no, because that's a very good way to learn, no, especially it's something new. Okay, so let me now turn to Aimee if there are questions that you'd like to be answered. So this is now the right time for us.
All right. Again, thank you for those who are still here. Actually, majority are still here. Um, we've received a lot of questions now. So I'll start off with the first one that I got here from
Yeah.
Paul. What happens if after conducting the assessment, there is an obvious gap between the management and the non-management?
Okay, that's a very good question to ask. The reason why this type of assessment is helpful because it helps you to be able to manifest the perception. Remember, the assessment uh, acts as a perception tool, meaning that if there is such a gap between management and non-management, then that's where the change should happen. Okay, so again, as I've said, it's important to manifest first if there's a gap. Okay, and obviously, if you'd want to have culture change, there would really be gaps in between the culture type. Okay, but the important thing there is for you to be able to come up with concrete steps of how you can be able to address your culture gap.
All right. Next question is, I think it's from Abigail. Hi, ma'am. Would like to ask a question: will the assessment be effective to a company with many branches? What if different branches has different culture? Right.
Okay, very good question. Well, even if you're in branches, for example, I do believe that um, branches tend to have your what you call subculture. Okay, the subculture can actually be manifested here, right? So you have, of course, your corporate culture, for example, has to be strengthened so that you can translate that into your culture in the branches. So definitely, when you talk about the culture type, no, what I've just shown you are the overview of the culture type, no. When you do the workshop itself, there are certain behaviors, no, that will tell you how it can be changed. How can change happen based on behavior? So this particular culture type, no, tells us what are behaviors that are helpful and are not helpful. So that will be manifested in the assessment and the workshop.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is from Bob. Hi, Aini. Can this tool be used for business units who have different cultures depending on activity and leader styles? Marketing is
Yes.
very different from IT. Thanks.
Yes, definitely yes. No, because what you'd like to happen here is to really have a snapshot of what culture you have in the company. As I've said, when you conduct the culture assessment itself, you would now see what type of culture are present in different units or departments, and what is the common denominator. Okay, and if you want to, develop some kind of new culture in certain departments, then that is your starting point. So the workshop, no, complements the assessment because after doing the survey, people have to be given the results. Okay, so they have to be given what is the general profile of, let's say, my department or the company as a whole. No, so by showing that to employees, no, that will make them more conscious, no, that such behavior is contributing to this type of culture, right? So in this case, what would like to happen is, if we'd want to improve other parts of the culture, what are behaviors that we need to do? Okay, so that is discussed during the workshop after the assessment.
All right. I think Bob wants to clarify the when you mentioned workshop.
Mhm.
He's asking, is it part of the free series or is it a separate workshop? It is a
Okay,
separate workshop. Yes.
yes. When I talk about the workshop, it is part of implementing the tool itself, no? Because the organizational culture assessment is a survey tool, no? But it can be maximized by having a what they call a culture workshop, wherein the results of the culture survey will be discussed directly to the participants of that company. So that's what we mean by the assessment and then the workshop. Okay, the workshop itself will not be delivered in the webinar. No? So what we're going to tell you are what are case studies of companies who have used this tool and have used it to do some organizational change.
All right. Next question is from Joy. Can this be used to assess candidates for vacancies to ensure that the candidate can adjust to the company culture?
Okay. This can also be used, so depending on if you look at how you're going to conduct the survey. If you have, let's say, new employees and then you have employees who have been with the company for quite some time, so it's part of the assessment for you to analyze whether a certain culture is, being appreciated or is appreciated by the new employees versus those who are currently, no, employed in the company. So yes, definitely that is something that can be considered as part of analyzing the results of the assessment tool.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is from Therese Manalo. Have you come across Denison Culture Survey? Pros and cons, she's asking.
Unfortunately, I haven't. So I'll try to look at that, by the way. Sige, thank you for that.
Right. Okay. Okay. Next question. This is from S8 Corp, from Juliet.
Mhm.
Can culture be dictated by management or as desired by management?
Well, a lot of companies tend to create culture that is, again, no, as we've said, values tend to be generated from management. No? So Management definitely is an influencer of culture in the company. But as we can see, in organizations, as we have said, there are two types of organization present in any company. No, the formal and the informal. Okay? When I say formal, the formal is the titles, the boxes, the hierarchy, for example. But the informal side of organization tells us who are connected to each other. Okay? Who is more influential to another person. And that will tell us whether management is able, no, to influence culture. So definitely, we will see that, no, in the implementation, for example, of the OKAI or the assessment tool. What you can do is you can have your management take this assessment, and then have your employees as well take the assessment and see the difference. Okay, so from there you will see what are the different points, no, between management and non-managerial employees.
All right. So we still have a lot of questions. We'll try to answer all of them in the interest of time. Okay. Another question from Bob. Where does the input come from? HR only? Ops?
Mm. Well, the survey itself is meant to be answered by different employees in the company. So you can actually conduct this to different types of employees, no? From management, supervisory employees, non-managerial employees, and even staff. Okay? It's a better way to assess, no, the overall company culture.
Yeah. Next question is from Mitch. Is there a need to have a committee to do the assessment? Who are the participants? Are top management included?
Well, HR could be the leader for doing this assessment, for example, for you to consolidate it. No, so definitely, you may form a committee, for example, if there is such a uh, you know if it's needed for you to be able to get support, no, from different members of the organization. So committees normally have that effect, no. So if there's a committee, then what happens is people are able to participate, no, in different parts of the organization. Okay, so I think we do we have another question?
Okay, let me check on the next question.
Okay.
From Rosie Tess. What if after the assessment it shows that the gap is within the top management and they are not ready to accept the changes? How can we go about it?
Okay. Well, in that case, for example, um, in part two, I will tell you what is needed. Example, no, if you realized in this assessment that top management is probably not in unity in terms of the certain culture, um, based on experiences and cases, what is done is to be able to first start a leadership development. Okay? Kasi it's important to have a solid leadership in your management. So that could be a possible solution for it if that is the gap, no, that is identified in the culture, in the assessment. Sorry.
All right. So there's still a lot of questions. So thank you very much because it just really reflects that you're very interested and for those who are still in the room, thank you very
Yeah.
much for staying with us. Next question is from Grace. How many participants, employees should we put in the survey or do the survey in order to conclude with the assessment?
Well, depending on your total population, the minimum number of respondents should be at least 30% of your total population. So that's the minimum. Okay. The ideal number or percentage of participant size is about 60% of your total population.
Yeah. Okay. So we have about a couple of questions from Mark. Hello, Mark. Thank you again for joining us. His first question is, what signs in an organization do we need to observe so we can tell that it is time to use okay. And
Okay.
then, yeah, okay.
So sige, let me answer that first question first. No, as I've said, the organizational culture tool can be used if there is that desire from management to be able to shift, no, certain parts of the culture. You know, there are probably behaviors that they see to be very negative for the company. So they, you know, that's a starting point, no, for you to be able to start, no, the organizational culture assessment. Another example could be that you can see that certain negative behaviors, no, are being exhibited. Let's say, for example, excessive disciplinary actions, for example, are happening in the company. So that means that somehow culture might, you know, the right culture is being diminished, meaning that, you know, even if management would want to have the right culture, somehow employees tend to have a different perception. Okay, so that's a starting point, no, for taking the culture assessment.
Okay. His second question is, people come and go, behaviors evolve and change. When do we assess an organization? Every 5 years, 10 years? What is the frequency?
Well, I would say, no, when you talk about culture change, no, it has to be aligned with your strategic planning. So, I would say, if you would want to, if you are engaged into strategic planning, the culture assessment is a good tool to use even on a year per year basis. So, let's say, for example, if you are trying to really shift a new culture in the company, you can do the assessment year after year, no, for you to look at whether changes are happening. Okay, so that's the beauty of this assessment because it can assess, no, what type of culture is generated, no, as you initiate changes in the company. So you can use it every year, probably after 5 years, assess it again, for example. So it depends. Again, it is very much suitable to use as a tool, no, for your strategic planning.
All right. So I think I hope we were able to address all the questions that you placed on the chat box. Again, thank you very much for joining us today. Just some special announcements. On July 29, that's next week. Also, I think that's also Friday. We'll be having our very first one-day online workshop. This is actually a summary. If you've attended job evaluation and designing pay structure, also the analysis, salary structure analysis. So we've put it in uh, one, we've made it into a one-day event. So there will be two sessions, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. So if you haven't registered, please visit our Facebook page, or you can also sign up by going to our website, www.talentreachconsulting.com. And if you want to watch the replay of this free webinar, we'll be posting this on our Facebook page. So make sure, if you're not following us yet, follow our Facebook page so that you can get notified whenever we conduct both our free webinars and our paid webinars. And if you have any questions or you have any inquiries about our services, our speaker is also a full-time consultant. So we actually have some of our clients joining us here. Thank you very much for your support. So if you have any inquiries or any general questions, you can always send us a message on our Facebook page or send us an email at italentreach@gmail.com. And please expect the material, the tool to be sent on your email
Yeah,
within by next week. So
yeah,
hopefully we'll be able to get send that by Wednesday at
yeah,
the latest. There. So again, if you're not yet registered for our one-day workshop implementing salary structure design and administration,
yeah.
we're just we actually just have 5 slots left. So if you
Mhm.
want to be part of the 20, so we're just allowing 20 because we want to make sure that this is a focused training in a focused workshop where we'll be able to really attend to the or maximize the learning experience of each participant, right? So
Yeah.
if you're interested with that, reach out to us. You can email us or send us a message on our Facebook page.
Okay, so let me just wrap up the discussion and, of course, what to expect on part two. No? So I hope that everyone will be able to join us for the second part of this webinar, where again, I will be discussing some case studies of how this particular tool was used and how culture change can happen. No? So that's why it's important for us to participate, no, in that next webinar, so that you can see not just the tool, no, being theoretical, but it is something that can be really applied in different organizations. No? So I'd like to see you there for our next webinar. So we will email you the details for that one. And again, we hope that this program was informative for you. No? And please, again, no, watch out for other programs or related to this particular tool that we have used for today. So with that, no, thank you very much for everyone here in the room. Have a good weekend ahead.
Thank you, everyone. Have a safe weekend.